was convicted of the first 2 rapes. A perspective of a neutral party. The one victim, the main victims of this case are the parents. That's what I want to say from the very beginning. The parents were, what I don't agree with is how the Cherokee Indian supporters of Gene Hart, which may have had good reason to support him, but they almost persecuted the parents for being there. They had to walk them in and out of the courtroom. So I just wanted to say that before I say anything else, that is who my heart goes out to the most. I mean, that's who I think are the real victims here. And the real injustice goes to. This case has not only murder, it has, old Indian ritualistic kind of undertone to it. Strange things happen during the case, which we're going to talk about tonight. It's just, there's something about this case that from the very beginning, Gene Hart was a good student. He was going to, somebody had mentioned that he had the chance to be drafted into the Dallas Cowboys, and when he spoke, he was extremely literate and well-spoken. Not at all what I expected when I actually watched all the interviews with all the parents and Gene Hart and just all the investigators. They had to find somebody, just like with the rapes of the women. I'm not saying the women are telling a lie, but I don't know. It's like just that instinct that you have. But anyway, let's get into the story. We're going to be doing the second half of the Camp Scott Girl Scout murders. Now, Carla, the main counselor who had gone in and out of the tent that night, hearing weird noises. The girls were complaining they were hearing weird noises, not just that tent, but also tent 7 and 6. And Carla had gone out. Now she's only 18 years old by herself. Her tent mate was sleeping, and she even said to her, she said, "Somebody, there are 3 or 4 flashlights out there. When I go out there and shine my light, they all go off. Then so she turns off her light, they all go back on again. And they start heading east towards the tents that the girl stayed in. So then she turns on her light. At this point, after everything that they knew, if you watch part 1, after everything that they knew about a strange man walking around, they never brought that up. Who was that strange man walking around the 410-acre camp that the director saw? Or the 2 weeks before that, when the camp had been vandalized and $58 had been taken and eyeglasses had been taken, and it seemed, and the camp had been, or that one of the tents was ripped open, and that note was left saying that 3 campers will die in tent 1, and they treated it like a joke. I don't care if it was a joke. You can throw on some out of security. They had enough money to buy all those acres. They should have had enough money to get either extra counselors, hire parents, have parents stay, whatever they needed to do. Have senior counselors do the buddy system. It just seems to me something wasn't right. It wasn't well thought out, even though they had all these kind of red flags telling them that something was going to happen. And somebody had been breaking into the girls' tents in the last, 3 or 4 months. Even within the last 3 days before the girls came. So Carla, watching her interview was really painful, because there is this young woman who eventually became a police officer herself. She was afraid to go outside and listen to the birds sing. She was afraid to hear the leaves crackle, in the wind, in the trees. Whenever she heard a stream, she was crying, because she was the one who found them. It was 6 a.m. in the morning when she decided to beat all the other counselors and kids to the showers. And it was already getting humid and kind of warm. So here she is with her towel, and she's smelling the air, she said, and listening to the birds chirping. And she is walking down the path, and as she's heading towards the showers, out of her peripheral vision, she sees something in the trail. She immediately thinks, oh, the maintenance man or bus driver had dropped those some stuff off that some of the campers had left up where they had been buzzed in from, and that they had not picked up the day before. And as she got closer, now her account is that she saw that Denise Milner had been on top of her suitcase. She actually saw her. She didn't have to go looking at the body. So she saw her as she got closer and realized, oh my God, what is going on? She didn't even realize the other two, suitcases, or the other two sleeping bags had, deceased little girls in them. She just saw the one and panicked. She ran back. She told the director, Day is her name, and Day said, well, just don't tell anybody. Okay. So, her husband actually went out there and looked at the other two sleeping bags. And she said he kneeled down and actually could feel their little tiny bodies. They were like at the very end of their sleeping bags. And they were like so tiny and so little. She said that it's what he couldn't grasp, is how they felt just like crushed into the end of the sleeping bag. Well, right there, the crime scene had been compromised. So before this, I find interesting too. So they go back. They tell the other counselors that something has happened. They kind of cover up Denise's body, and they start getting all the campers to get their stuff ready. They call the parents, right? But before they call the parents, she calls her insurance agent, the insurance company, and she calls her attorney. And then the first phone call she made was to, I think, I want to say Lori's parents. No, Michelle's parents. And Michelle's father said that he was so kind of disgusted by the fact that she called her insurance company, then her attorney, and then him, and then called the other two parents. He was not told how she died. Matter of fact, he said he found out because of the news cast that afternoon as they were getting ready to go pick, go hear what happened. And she said, well, no, you stay there. Somebody will be over. And I think I said this yesterday. So the parents are just not told anything. All these girls got all of their stuff together. And get on the bus, and all these parents are frantic because they're like, why in the world are we being called to pick up our children right after we just dropped them off the next day? So, which is a great question in my mind. And as I was saying, that fourth camper, that was not her troop. That actually was pulled from that tent and placed with her troop hours before the actual murders. To this day, says it's almost like survivor's guilt. She just thinks about how that she could have been the fourth one. And I mean, listening to the siblings and listening to the interviews with the parents was heartbreaking. So this manhunt ensued. The police came in, and the police immediately realized this is way too big a profile of a case for just us. So the OSPSI came in, and they started to process the crime scene. And what they found in the tent was all of the killer had tried to clean up the blood with the mattresses and their towels. And there was part of, there's a shoe print that was a 9.5. And, which I found interesting because the eventual person that they kind of decided had done these murders had an 11.5. It was a Cherokee Indian. And there was a handprint of blood, a bloody handprint on the side of the door. And the interesting thing is that was from an OSPSI guy. So, already the crime scene was so sloppy as far as investigators go. Between the police and the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, the Highway Patrol, and then of course the counselors. And then the director, Miss Day's husband, who had touched the bags, the sleeping bags, and it would cover up the body. There were footprints all around the cabin. There were footprints inside the cabin, 9.5. There were no 11.5 footprints that I heard that were found. Excuse me. So, they had a few. The thing is, asking around the community, like, who could this be? And first person accused was this local farmer. Now, the saddest thing was, now this is really too bad, that the girls were, discuss the victims, how they were found. They were duct taped, tied up, and bludgeoned the last one to be processed, and he was thinking, please, God, just don't let one been sexually assaulted. And he said that her underwear were twisted, and, you know, she would have never put her underwear on like that. So, this man, who was a farmer, local farmer, who was immediately pulled out and said, well, you know, I've seen them use this, you know, or that I saw him near the campsite this day, whenever. Well, the investigators go into his barn and they find the same tape and the same rope. And before they could even rule him out as innocent, the press took over and immediately said, kill her, slay her. And he was given a polygraph, passed with flying colors, and it was found out that his barn was vandalized hours before the murders. Literally hours. And other things were missing too, so it was, and it was ransacked, so it wasn't, he was this old man, he was like, you know, it was so bad, the media had pegged him as the killer to the point of where he just kept getting, you know, prank calls. He couldn't go to the grocery store, he couldn't drive out of his driveway. People had just harassed this man until finally they had to eject himself into a mental institution because he had a breakdown. That was horrific because he didn't do anything. He was a victim himself of theft, and he was close by where the murders took place. And so that was very convenient because almost every farmer has duct tape and rope in their barn. Just off the bat persecuted him because they heard he was, you know, being looked at, was wrong of the press. Now, somebody then came forward and said, well, there's, you know, a man on the run, Gina Hartver. He had escaped from prison twice, and he was accused of raping two pregnant women, and leaving him for dead in 1966. In a similar way that the girls were, but he didn't bludgeon them. He just, basically what he did, tied them up, and after he was done raping them, he left them in the woods. Well, the one girl got free, and so he must not have tied them that tight. So this manhunt ensued, with costing the state of Oklahoma the $1,052,000, more than any other in today's money, more than any other case it ever cost them, as far as, you know, trying to find somebody. And he eluded the police for 4 years prior to this, and he kept eluding them for 10 months. During this time, though, weird things. They had 2 undercover American Indians that came in and would stay in the woods, kind of listening and looking, and they would, you know, go to different medicine men, and that was a big part of this case. This old medicine, the ancient one, the old one, you know, was a big, you know, in the rituals that they would perform. And he had gotten 2 different medicines. One to help him in tracking somebody, and 2 to help him, what was the second one he got for it? To find the perpetrator. So just as he had thrown the medicine on the fire, this one undercover American Indian investigator, the fire had blown up, and within a minute or 2 there were also 2 other regular detectives there, sitting there around the fire with him, his phone rings, and here they had found Gina to where he was staying. So that was really interesting to him. Now the reason he started going to the medicine men was because there had been rumor, like there was said to the police, because there was such a Cherokee Indian section of the Cherokee Indians that really supported Hart and wanted to protect him, and thought he was wrongfully accused the first time, and thought he was going to be wrongfully accused this time. So they had said, the one guy said, your dogs will lose the scent, and they will die, because they had brought these miracle dogs, quote unquote, that could track anybody in from Pennsylvania. They'd flown them in. Within a couple months, the one had died of heat exertion, a young dog, and then two more, and one had just run out for no reason. Now these are well-trained dogs. Run out for no reason in front of a car and died. So this American Indian who was undercover started to get really nervous that there was something to this. So that's why he started going to get medicine to help him kind of counterbalance this, ancient law of the energies, I guess. And he believes it, did help. At the trial, there were 4 medicine men there. And now medicine men's job, not to, well, let's rewind. The place they found Hart he was hiding out with a medicine man. And they got him by going to the medicine man's wife's house and basically threatening her and saying that, she would be indicted federally if she didn't give up, Gene, Mr. Hart. So she takes him in an unmarked car and Gene goes to run out the back door and then just closes it. And then he is arrested, taken in, and as he picks him up, he looks at him and he goes, you're not gonna pin this on me. Now everybody took that to mean he was guilty immediately. But I see it as he felt like he was wrongly accused, and it had pinned on him. The first 2 rapes were pinned on him the first time, and that he felt like it was going to be the scapegoat again. That is my own opinion. Most people said, it was because he was immediately assumed guilty. However, they don't really go into a lot of detail. There were really 4 other people accused of this that had been in the area. And remember, Carla saw 3 or 4 different lights. There were 3 girls. It would be pretty darn difficult to subdue 3 little girls all at once, because they weren't sleeping well. The rainstorm had just stopped, and it was still wet outside. It would be slippery. It would be very, very, very difficult to contain these 3 girls who would have been out of their mind with being afraid. And just before that happened, somebody had gone into tent 7 and shined their light in one of the girls' faces and then left. But while this is happening, they said that right after that they heard screams, and the one girl said she had a sleepover with, I think it was Lori, and she knew her scream, and she was thinking, oh, I wonder if she's scared of the dark, or, the storm is scaring her, something to that effect. So she knew it was her screaming. I don't know. So then, this Carla goes out again around midnight. She had gone out at 11 o'clock, saw the lights. They'd gone out around midnight because she, 1 o'clock. And she heard these kind of strange growling noises or gurgling or non-human. She described it, I can't remember the exact word she used, but very similar to the words or the adjectives that the one girl that was raped, she had come on and said that he, sounded like when he was raping her. Now, I'm going to look into that case, because the other one was not interviewed, and the one gal had her face darkened. She said that's how she knew it was him, because one of his ex-girlfriends had told him that, when they were intimate, he would growl or have these gurgling noises come from him. So she said, oh, it must be him. And I don't know if that's the only reason, or if, I don't know anything about that case other than that's kind of what really pushed the investigators to think that it was Jean Hart, because of that adjective that came from Carla and the woman who was accused of raping her. One of the women he was accused of raping, that he had escaped from prison twice for. Now, so he is now in custody, and before he was caught, there was, interestingly enough, there was this cave found, and written in the cave was, the killer was here, the joke's on you, and then the date, which was the same date, something like that. It was something so, not important at all, because it was, why would he do that? I don't know. The way they made him out, they made him sound like such an ignorant person that it was very strange to listen to his voice and how well spoken he was. They made him seem like he had, I don't know just how they described him, that he was, something wrong with him, but he was actually, was a star football player, and it was a little town back when, 1966, people were racist, especially against the American Indians and definitely the Black Hispanic, cultures. It's hard to say, was he framed? Because why would Carla see all those lights, and yet there was only one guy? Then the gal who was also raped said he wore her eyeglasses. Now, she did not say this until afterwards, that she recalled him wearing her eyeglasses. They didn't really expound on that's what she said after he had been, accused the second time. She came on and said, oh yeah, well, I do remember him wearing my glasses. I thought that was strange, but never mentioned that before. Now, they said he admitted to it, but back then, fluids from They did say it was impossible for Gene to have committed the murders because he could not produce any body fluids because he had a vasectomy. But that turned out not to be the case, as they found out it wasn't done properly and that he could produce. It would just be disformed if, it wouldn't work, wouldn't get anybody pregnant. But they also said that a piece of hair found on the victims was an identical match to his. Now, I looked at this, and yes, there are some striations that match identically, but there's a lot that do not. And in 1994, DNA was pulled off of the couple of the victims' sleeping bags and pillowcases, and it was a female DNA. So that means there was more than one person there. And even one of the mothers said, I always felt like there was a woman there. She doesn't know why. It was just some kind of instinctual feeling that she had that there was another female involved for some reason. Now, let's go back to the cave or rock formation they found, basically, where they said he was hiding out, which he wasn't hiding out. This undercover American Indian who was playing the part of, with his brother, actually brought his brother in because he wanted to be able to trust whoever it was, because American Indians are very, very tight-knit and they don't let the white man in, especially back then. They did not let them on their land. They did not let them into their practices, so they had to go to an American Indian, and then he didn't want to go in by himself, obviously. He didn't want to go sit in the woods by himself. I wouldn't. Knowing that there's a killer on the loose, maybe multiple killers, you never know. And he said that the second medicine that he had to tell him if he was on the path to the right person or if he had gotten the right person, when he put it in the fire, as he put it in, minutes later, a cat jumped up on his chest and then fled. And he also said that made him nervous again, with the dogs dying and just strange things happening, that there was a legend going around, or a folklore going around, that Gene Hart was actually a skinwalker, or a shape changer, or a shapeshifter, whatever. And that's very big in American Indian culture. If you've never researched that, I suggest you do. It's very interesting, very interesting. And so once that happened to him, he was all on board. So the American Indian medicine man that he went to was actually being interviewed, and he was the one he said that at the trial there was 4 medicine men there. Now, medicine men are good-hearted people. They won't accuse somebody, and they will protect their own. However, they will use the power and the energies of all 4 corners of the, east, north, west, south, the seasons, the 4 seasons, elements, to produce the power to guide them and to kind of put a curse on whoever, or to put the blame to where it belongs, no matter what the corner. Okay. So they decide, this medicine man said that they decided that they were going to have to go to the most sacred of all medicines, which is considered the ancient one, the old one, very powerful kind of tobacco, was, he said he put it on all four corners of the courthouse. And he said no matter what the verdict, eventually, he said, within life, there is death. And that was it. So, he spreads this on each corner of the courthouse. This very powerful medicine. The four medicine men, including himself, was there. And he was acquitted of these murders. So, excuse me. Now at the end, it was said that the fluid found in the girls was 99 out of 100,000, would have this type of, DNA. So it was pretty much saying that, Gennard had, that was his fluid. And it was type O blood, and, the blood found in the victims and on the victims was type O. However, in 1994, I said that there was female DNA that was found, which surprised everybody. That was never looked into again, which I find very strange. Why not? There were 4 flashlights. How could one man subdue 3 women? And the accusation to Gennard the first time was that he raped them. I guess he had sodomized the one. She was not on there. The gal that was on there didn't kind of glazed over that, but had tied her up. But she lived. She said she got free of, I guess she had said he left her out there to die, but if he really wanted to kill her, like he did the little girls, why would he go from killing adults, or not killing adults and just raping them, then going to little kids? Because I do think there's a big difference in the rape and murder of a child, even with rapists, than a rape and murder of an adult. And I do want to say that would have been a huge step for Gennard. And nobody mentioned that these were little kids, like 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so he raped an adult. Yes, that's terrible, terrible, terrible. But he didn't bludgeon them. So that's another thing that's different. But these girls were bludgeoned to death, strangled. I mean, whoever, and raped and sodomized whoever it was that wanted, or that did this, wanted them dead. They were a killer, and they were a baby killer. I mean, that is a big jump from adult to child. Why not take one of the counselors? You know what I mean? I mean, if he wanted to rape and hurt anybody, why wouldn't he do it to one of the counselors? Because he never had anything on his record that had anything to do with child molestation or anything. And I feel that is a huge, huge jump. Maybe I'm wrong, but that was never brought up. And I thought, gosh, that's a big MO change. I mean, even serial killers will not kill somebody because they're like, oh my gosh, your mother. I mean, I've done, maybe I haven't done it, but I have read in, one of my hundreds of books that I have, that there has been, maybe it was the BTK killer. Who was it? It was somebody famous that I was reading about, but he said, oh, your mother, and he literally lot of times, I mean, even when there's a child there, unless the child's old enough to, and even sometimes not, if the child's old enough to, point the finger at them, they will just leave them alone. That even a serial killer or somebody who has killed over and over, that's a huge step, big step. I mean, even with murderers in prison, child molesters are notorious for having to be separated from the general population because of the violence that is ensued upon them. So they never brought that up, but I thought that was also a very unique point that, well, if he just wanted to rape somebody and kill them, why didn't, not just, I know I'm kind of making light of that, but compared to 3 little children, why wouldn't he take one of the counselors? Heck, she was out in the woods 2 or 3 times. Why those little campers? And the note that was left, that handwriting was never compared to Jean's. There was just these little things that I thought that, what are they covering up? Who are they covering up for? So there was this other man that had been accused of the murders, and he actually killed himself about the same time Jean died. So, one of 2 things: that medicine had found the one, because at the end they just kind of left it that Jean died of a heart attack at 34 because, he was the killer. However, they didn't also tell about the amounts of cyanide that were later discovered in the prison near him that he could be inhaling, or that he could have been ingesting. That was a little down in those days, and I know it sounds crazy, but what do you think? There's just a lot of little things. Not that I'm saying, oh, Jean Hart's innocent. I'm not saying that at all. But I believe there were more people involved. And B, why didn't they? The biggest question is, why didn't they go after that female DNA and try to find who that belonged to? Why was it all focused on Jean? Why didn't they ask him about, did he have anybody with him? He never said a word. He just said, you're not going to pin this one on me. Like, they had pinned the first one on him, and a lot of people thought that was his admission of guilt. Or I looked at it the way he said it was, because they had a video of him saying that, and the way I felt that he said it was, you're not going to pin another one on me. That's what I really felt like he was saying. Not, well, you're not going to pin this one on, but he would have said, well, you're not going to get me for this, or, I don't know. What do you think? Maybe I'm not seeing it because I'm not really looking on either side. I'm kind of trying from a very objective point of view, looking in from somebody who's simply looking at the facts. There was, yes, the fluids, yes, so, okay, he was there, but the MO really changed. If he was, and correct me if I'm wrong out there, because to become a rapist of 2 women that you leave for dead and don't have the guts to kill, he could have killed them. He could have tied them up so tight that they couldn't have gotten out of their shackles and left. But no, they got out and are both fine. Maybe, and then to go and to murder 3 little tiny girls and rape and sodomize and bludgeon them. The camp director got down and said the bodies were just crushed. That doesn't seem like the same person. Am I right or wrong? My instinct's telling me that the farmers, the poor farmer, was really robbed of his life, and that it was terrible. The parents were just robbed of theirs. The girls obviously were robbed of theirs. But I think also Gene was robbed of his as well. There was something, he was going to be, somebody even had said that he was good enough of a player to actually be, it was going to be drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. Now that's a good football player, which means jealousy. And as we all know, in this line of work, jealousy is one of the main motives for murder. This case really, I don't think they got the killers. Now, whether the killer killed himself, whether it was that kid, or if Gene Hart was running from the police and people in the town knew it, and they knew that if they would do this, and see, Gene had grown up not even a mile from the camp, so all they knew, they would put all this together, and those women lived in the town. It could have easily been one of their boyfriends or them, one of them saying, we're gonna get him back. I don't know, but why would somebody running from the law that eluded the law for 4 years all of a sudden decide he's gonna start stalking this camp for no reason? He breaks out of prison, and then 4 years later he decides to go rape and murder 3 little girls and breaks into this camp. It almost doesn't sound it doesn't sound logical, which honestly, I'm gonna just be judgmental here, because I honestly thought that he was maybe not all there. The way they made him out, but when I heard him speak, I was like, what? That doesn't even sound like the same person that they're talking about. It's very strange. And that's what made me start to rethink my entire thought process. This man, being intelligent, had gotten out of prison twice. And they said that there was pictures. Now I find this very interesting. The first time they searched the cave, or the place that they said he was hiding out, this whole time in this cave, I don't know, that was right by the camp, which was right by his mother's house. So in 4 years they couldn't find him there. I don't know, but they said that the second time they looked, there was these pictures of these women, and they came from the sheriff's desk. And the sheriff even said himself that when he had moved, him from one to another before he had escaped, he never had those in his possession. So that was an interesting admission from the warden of the prison he was staying at, that he never had, Gene never had those in his possession. But yet, I don't know how they ended up in the cave, planted there by somebody who was pissed. I don't know. Also, the handwriting was never compared to the note left at the camp. I don't know why. I don't know why anybody would think 3 campers are gonna die is a joke. Like, how would the camp director even come to that conclusion with having a bunch of young tiny little girls come, and then say 3 campers in 10 to 1, which if you look at the map, like I judged last night, the 8 and 1 could easily be mistaken one or the other. So anyway, unfortunately he's dead. Now, a lot of people think that Gene died not because he was guilty, but because of this stress of being accused. I mean, he went out for a run, and they said it was something about the barometric pressure on his heart and made him fall and have a heart attack. Just so happens to be he was the only one out there, and there was cyanide that was found in the prison. I don't know. But, I also just know how the camp handled this. So, the camp was sued twice by the parents. Now, I blame the camp wholeheartedly. And I'll tell you why. I don't blame the camp for the murders, obviously. They didn't commit the murders that I think of. I mean, nothing ever pointed to any of them. However, if they were getting death threats to the campers, having the campers then slashed, having things stolen, eyeglasses were stolen, money was stolen, the camp counselors' tents were ransacked, and then a strange man who was not Gene Hart was seen walking around the grounds. That was another thing. When asked if that was Gene Hart that was walking around, they said no. So a man with a water bottle was walking around the grounds. Now this is 410 acres, and really anything outside of this camp acreage was sacred land, sacred American Indian land. So it wasn't an American Indian who was walking the campgrounds. And I don't know why the director didn't go up to him and chase him down and ask him what he was doing there. Another thing I found was strange, that the camp director, Miss Day, had called her insurance company and then her attorney before she made any of the calls to the parents. I found that very strange. Her husband was the one to touch the bodies, to feel the bodies, he was there, being dead, right there. If you see a dead girl and you find, if you go into, why didn't they just go look in the cabin where all this blood was? They said there was blood all over the cabin, off the walls and everything. Why wouldn't they have just kind of put it together instead of just, bending down and squeezing the bags of these little girls? Why would they go look in the cabins for them? That was kind of strange to me too, because he was really putting his DNA or his fingerprints or whatever, they used back then, hair sample, onto the bodies. I don't know. Then I watched a podcast that showed the camp now, and literally, after spending all of this money on this beautiful camp, this 410 acres in it, for 50 years, campers had been there, and because of this, the camp was never ever touched again. No camper ever camped at that camp again. So why did they just put up a big fence and lots of security and keep the camp? But no, they just deserted the camp and sold it off to a private owner. Like, they didn't want anybody back on that ground. That was kind of strange to me too. Not that it wouldn't be disrespectful, but it was like, I don't know, something about that didn't sit right well with me either. Because immediately after, not another camper have lived there throughout the years. I mean, there's this whole big thing of this guy had walked through it, and I watched this podcast on it, or this vlog, and there was kids' clothes and bikes, and like people had been living there over the years. I mean, VHS, tons of VHS tapes, like 2 big things of them, shelves of them. It was strange. It was, to say the least, very strange. Now, that land had been originally sacred land too, or was said to be sacred land. So I don't know if that had anything to do with that. Maybe they felt it was cursed. I don't know. But I'm just going through this, and as much as I've investigated and researched this and read and watched, I mean, hours and weeks of really just, I mean, 3 or 4 hours a night just sitting there listening to, the interviews with the parents and the camp counselor, the one camp counselor, and why weren't all the camp counselors interviewed? And I think the camp director's husband was never interviewed. It was just the one gal who still is with the Girl Scouts of America as of then, which was probably 15 years ago. But, and then the female DNA, which was never brought up again, which I found very strange. Like, what did they do with that sample? I don't know. Just think about it, and none of it really makes sense. And I can see why he was acquitted of this, because there are so many questions that I have that are outside. Why were there 4 flashlights? Why would somebody who was in hiding all of a sudden come out of hiding, who, yes, had raped 2 women, which is a tragedy at all, I mean, but didn't bludgeon them to death? And why would he go then to little girls and sodomize them, rape them, strangle them, mutilate their bodies, bash? I mean, the way the bodies were found were not the same way that these 2 women who lived were found. I mean, if anything, why wouldn't if it were Gene, why wouldn't he rape the girls if he decided to go to young? I mean, he hadn't done anything before except for a couple burglaries, and then the rapes, and then nothing for 4 years, and all of a sudden he decides to come out of hiding and murder 3 little girls, rape them, bludgeon them. I mean, that does not, and then, so then my mind goes back to 1966, when, alright, this is kind of giving me the chills, in Colorado, when in another Girl Scout camp, 10 years before, actually it's 14 years before, so it had to be 1962, this 16-year-old girl was left alone because her roommate had a cold, so she was in the nurse's office, and was raped, bludgeoned to death, sodomized, and left zipped up in their bag, sleeping bag, at a Girl Scout camp, following a very similar MO to the Oklahoma murders. And Oklahoma and Colorado are not that far apart. And nobody brought that up either. I thought that was a strange coincidence. Does anybody else think that that's kind of a strange coincidence too? But they'd never thought about that or brought that up. And she was only 16. And here she was by herself. She was alone in the cabin. And kind of like the same thing at Camp Scott. the camp counselor didn't know what it was inside. She thought the girl had died of a heart attack. The 16-year-old healthy girl just decided to die of a heart attack on the floor in the camp. So she cleans up all of the blood and like all of the broken, stuff that's around the body, cleans up the crime scene, and then calls the police and says, well, I thought she died of a heart attack. The hell is that? That doesn't make any sense. And then 10 years later, almost to the day, these 3 little girls are then killed in the same manner. Found zipped up in there, except for the one, which I think that, she was the oldest, and she was probably trying to get away, and she probably got away. She was 100 yards from the other girls, so, the other girls were so young, and little, that, the other girl, you had 10, they start to grow, and their hormones are developing. Like my daughter, she just shot up 6 inches, so when she turned 10, so that's a big step from 8 to 10, and that to me, that could have been something. Nobody ever brought that up again, and that had to do at a Girl Scout camp 10 years prior, and killed in the same way, zipping them up. I don't know. That's a little bit odd to me. Now, this is just purely speculation, but those are facts. Okay, based upon those facts from that case at a fairly close location 10 years earlier, or 14 years earlier, that a young girl was sodomized, raped, murdered, bludgeoned to death, zipped up in her sleeping bag, when she was by herself in the tent, because her roommate, and at 16, obviously, you'd be bigger, you'd be stronger, you would have to just kill one, where the little ones were, probably an easier target. So, I'm sorry I got off on a rant. But then the parents go to sue the camp, which I think is completely at fault, because they had all of these red flags like we talked about yesterday. But then, here's the thing. All these red flags, never hired on more camp counselors, never asked for parents to come and be, there to sleep with the girls. Why? And the way this one cabin was, it was a tent that was in the bushes. The camp counselors couldn't even see this tent. They couldn't see this tent. Why would the youngest girl in the camp be put there with 2 other really young girls and no counselor? Why wasn't a counselor? Like when I went to camp, I was even telling my daughter, I think we had 2 counselors in each tent, or in each cabin. We had cabins at the time. After all the threats, all the break-ins, even just take away the threat, the break-ins, right? If I was the director of the camp, I would double, triple, quadruple want to protect these little girls that were coming in a few days after seeing a strange man walking around the grounds. I would hire security guards with dogs that would, walk constantly around the entire, 10 or 15 of them. It wouldn't matter what it cost, because if they were being ransacked while the counselors were there at their pre-counselor training, what do you think would happen when these little girls were there by themselves? Anyway, the courts decided that they were not at fault. So they appealed, and again, never at fault. And I think that was really, the parents were the most abused of anybody, from the Cherokees. It's like they were the ones on trial. They had to be let out in their car. They were basically, the one father said, they were kicked out of town. They were not had to leave immediately when the trial was over. So the ones that really suffered the most were the parents, and I felt, and they were the ones. What did they do? They sent their children to a camp that was that they thought their kids were going to be safe. That's it. That's all they did. They paid the money, and I don't know. They had insurance. I don't know why they didn't give the parents any kind of, anything for their losses. I don't know. And just how the whole thing was handled with them was so inconsiderate and just not very kind. So my heart goes out to the victims' families. And I want to say, just because I'm whispering does not mean I'm being in any way disrespectful. It is an ASMR style that I am delivering this in. And to me, it is a much calmer way to deliver the information, and I like to listen to it in an ASMR style. Matter of fact, I'm all riled up because I've been listening to the yelling, and she's saying, all these swear words, and oh my god, that's terrible, and it's stressing me out. I literally have knots in my stomach. So, not that they weren't good podcasts, because they were. It's just so, for me personally, it's just more relaxing, and I can hear the information a lot less unnerved. And at the end of it, I can think about, as I'm whispering and talking to you all, I'm thinking about what was not brought up in a much clearer mind than when I'm listening to a very dramatic, loud presentation. Not that it's wrong. I mean, believe me, most people think me whispering is disrespectful. But even one detective said that when he walked up, everybody was talking in a whisper, that he could not even hear a bird chirping. It was so quiet. And he said it was out of respect for those 3 little girls. So, I know some people think whispering is bad, or disrespectful, but in no way am I meaning to be disrespectful. My heart goes out to the victims' families for sure. 100%. My heart goes out to the family of, Mr. Hart and the American Indian Cherokee tribe there. They got a lot of criticism. And having lived in the South, I realize the extent of even today, the kind of racial tension that can be very influential in certain cases. I'm not 100% convinced that some of the evidence wasn't planted. Because I don't know. That's my gut feeling. And it is a lot of other people who work the case too. That when the officer says that they were worried about the sheriff planning some things, and then one last thing before I go. Almost everybody on that case resigned immediately after, for some reason. I don't know why. Why would an entire Bureau of Investigation resign from their jobs immediately after? I don't know. That officers resigned. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's very normal. Anyway, please tell me what you think. This is such a convoluted and interesting case. You've kind of, if I could accurately depict what was said by these investigators, but really go on and listen to this podcast, I'll leave it in the description, hashtags, your comments. Please leave all of your opinions. I will respond to them all. Have a great evening. I'm running out of time. And I love you guys. Thank you so much. I'll shut up.